Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Ant got 40 plus for a third straight time on Monday night, but nobody else came to the party. The Wolves had a historically bad start to the game. We'll talk about how bad and another strong Ant game. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I am the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Tuesday, everybody. The Timberwolves lost to the Cavs on Monday night, what for all intents and purposes was a blowout. We also got to see a third consecutive 40-plus point performance from Ant. A terrible start to the game for Minnesota. Really a lot to get to in this one. Well, it was basically a blowout. There's just a lot to talk about. I feel like a lot happened in this game for something that felt relatively decided very early. We'll talk about Ant's game. We'll talk about his frustrations once again with the referee and another technical for Ant. So much to get to. And also at the end of the show, I want to talk a little ownership. That thing was settled on Monday. Basically settled. So we'll touch on that. I'll maybe spend a little more time on it Wednesday. So a packed show today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder, you can subscribe to the daily newsletter at lockedondaily.com. It's one stop for ultimate Wolves coverage, ultimate NBA coverage, delivered right to your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. All right. So the Timberwolves come into Cleveland with Anthony Edwards and Mike Conley questionable on the injury report. I didn't think either of them would play. I believe the line coming into the game was 8.5 on FanDuel on Sunday, and then it was up to 9.5 on Monday. Given that trend, given Ant not playing Saturday and the Wolves winning Saturday, I thought there was a chance he wouldn't play with the sore hip and that maybe he'd play in like one of the two, back-to-back Wednesday, Thursday games, Milwaukee and OKC, two very tough games. I was wrong. He played in this game, and he played well overall. So that was kind of the backdrop, the first DeAndre Hunter game for Cleveland post-trade deadline. So he was in the starting lineup for them, ended up only having to play 23 minutes, but he played well. And, Cleveland's just a really, really good team. And the Wolves got off to a miserable start in this one. It was 18-1 in the first quarter of this game. Minnesota did not make a field goal until an Anthony Edwards three-pointer at the 2:55 mark in the first quarter. So they went 9 minutes and 5 seconds without making a bucket from the field. To that point, they had made, 5 free throws? Yeah, Gobert made a free throw. Their first point came. So I say that. They went 7 minutes without scoring a point. It was 16-0 at the 4:56 mark. Gobert gets a rebound, offensive rebound, gets fouled, misses the first free throw, makes the second. Ant made a couple of free throws, and then Rob Dillingham made a couple of free throws. But they didn't make a field goal until the 2:55 mark, and then they didn't hit another field goal until Nas got a layup at the buzzer of the first quarter. So they scored 5 points off of field goals, and thankfully scored 7 points off of free throws in the first quarter. I actually don't think they got any more free throws in the second quarter. I think they had 7 made free throws at halftime. And that was kind of the story of the game, is the Wolves' ability to get to the line, obviously, aside from the cold start, and we'll talk about Ant. Minnesota continued to get to the free throw line, which we've seen a ton of, and I talked about this a little bit on Monday's show. That's been a big shift with their offense now, has been crashing the offensive glass a little bit more, not a little bit more, a lot more, and then getting to the free throw line more frequently. I mean, they had 30 free throw attempts in this game. They drew 24 personal fouls against Cleveland, and it made up some of the ground that they gave up outside the arc, which we'll talk about too. But it's basically what kept them in the game, was getting to the free throw line. And that's a big change for Minnesota. But other than that, like the offense early on, there was an element when the Wolves couldn't score and, it had been 5+ minutes without a field goal. There became an element of just kind of chucking, like, hey, three-pointer offensive rebound, three-pointer offensive rebound. And but the thing is most of them were good looks. Like, there were some forced shots, yes. There was maybe one Ant three in there. There was somebody had to move to the middle and shot a tough kind of runner. I think that might have been Nas, like, hey, we just need a shot to go down. But if you go back and watch, the Wolves had like 4 or 5 shots go in and out, like easily could have gone down. I was almost questioning the rims at one point because like to go 9 minutes without a field goal is nuts. To go 7 minutes without scoring is also nuts. And again, there were a handful of good looks in the first quarter, but Cleveland and to on the other end of the floor, Cleveland didn't score for a little while either. In fact, they got to the how long did it take them to score? Cleveland didn't score until we got to the 9:49 mark. So they went over 2 minutes without scoring as well. And they actually didn't look all that great offensively early. And then all of a sudden, kind of the floodgates opened up. The Wolves allowed a lot of runouts because of all the misses they were getting. And, you look at the end of the game, you look at the box score, and Cleveland only had how many fast break points? They didn't actually have that many fast break points. They only had 11 fast break points. It felt like a lot more. There were a couple that were not technically transition, but they were more the secondary break, semi-transition. I like to call it the secondary break, where like, hey, we're running. We didn't get the shot initially. We're going to pull it back out, and now we're going to hit a cutter, or we're going to hit a trailer down the floor for an open three in semi-transition or the secondary break. That's killed the Wolves a lot this year. And even last year, like the actual fast break defense, the transition defense itself was okay, but then the Wolves get mismatched in the half court, or they end up, loaded up on the ball. Then there becomes an open guy just cutting down the floor, trailing the play and rim running, whatever the case might be. And they don't communicate well enough on the back end. And the Wolves give up a wide open three on the weak side, or a dunk or a layup, or foul somebody because they're out of position. That happened a ton in this game. So you look at the fast break points, and it's 16-11 in the box score, but it was worse than that if you include those secondary break opportunities. And Cleveland built this lead in part because of that. And that's how they kept ahead of the Wolves in the second quarter. Like, the Wolves finally started to score in the second quarter. They had 32 points in the second quarter, 34 in the third quarter, and Cleveland's a good defense. But the problem was Cleveland was running after makes against this Wolves team. And the Wolves' perimeter defense was shoddy. I think that's a very fair word to use. Nickeil got beat off the dribble many times in this game. Jalen Clark was okay, provided a little more resistance, I think, than Nickeil for most of the game, but had some kind of ticky-tack fouls. He was trying to be a little too physical because he got beat off the dribble a little bit. And to be clear, like, we're talking Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, like dudes that can beat anybody off the dribble. But that we had the Jaden McDaniels flagrant foul, the frustration foul where he shoved, I think it was Ty Jerome in the back. Like, the Wolves got very frustrated early in this game because of the lack of offense, because of their struggles on offense, and they let it carry over to the defensive side, and then they never picked it back up defensively. When the offense caught up for Minnesota, the defense was horrible, and they gave up 30-plus points in each of the first three quarters, including 36 in the second quarter to Cleveland and 38 in the third quarter. The perimeter defense is where the issue was. Rudy was fine in this game. He was certainly not the problem. Actually, he had a couple of very nice blocks in this one. Nas had a nice block. It was the perimeter defense that was allowing these dudes to get into the paint and get the shots up on the rim in the first place. That was the problem. It wasn't the perimeter defense, or the paint defense. It was the perimeter defense for Minnesota. So things got off because the offense was so bad early, and there was just a lot of missed open shots. That led to transition and semi-transition secondary break opportunities for Cleveland. And then the half-court defense struggled because the Wolves were so frustrated with themselves on offense, was my take on it. Like, we know Nickeil can guard. We know Jaden can guard. We know Ant can guard. We know Jalen Clark can guard. It just didn't happen. And then also part of the result, or part of the response to this for Minnesota, was they just ended up playing a lot of isolation ball. And we've seen this from the Wolves before. And granted, some of it was Ant because it needed to be Ant, and we'll talk about him here in the next segment. But I mean, Minnesota only had they had 36 made field goals in this game, and they only had 17 assists. Cleveland had 27 assists in this game on 48 makes from the field. So I guess rate wise, maybe that's not that far off, but it was an issue. And the Wolves got up 4 less 3-pointers than Cleveland. That's a math problem. Cleveland shot nearly 40% from 3. The Wolves shot 31% from 3. So yeah, the Wolves might have scored 8 more points at the free throw line. Cleveland scored 15 more points outside the arc, and ultimately put this thing away for all for all those reasons. I want to talk about some individual performances. We'll talk about kind of what happened as the game wore on. We'll talk about Ant's game. And then we'll close with studs and duds and a little bit of the ownership talk. So we'll do all that here next. Running a small today's episode is brought to us by our friends at Open Phone. Running a small business means you're wearing a lot of hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone, and before you know it, you're juggling customer calls day and night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. That's where Open Phone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of just a few coffees, you get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. Open Phone works through an app on your phone or computer and integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second you hang up. And if you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, Open Phone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/lockdownnba. That's OpenPhone, OPENPHONE.com/lockdownnba for 20% off 6 months. Openphone.com/lockdownnba. And if you have existing numbers with other service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. All right. We talked about the Timberwolves' slow start. We talked about the offensive frustration leading to struggles defensively. We talked about the isolation ball. In the half court, lack of assists for Minnesota. Part of it was lack of transition opportunities. And also, I should mention the horrible execution and fast breaks. I meant to get to this sooner, actually. It was so bad. There were two, I think two, at least two. There may have been two that I can think of, 3-on-1 break opportunities that the Wolves messed up worse than a middle school team would mess up. The spacing was horrendous. Like, if it's pretty obvious, but in a 3-on-1 situation, you got to be spread out. One guy can't guard three guys, right? If you don't space out and you're running like a 3-man weave minus the passing, like basically the width of the free throw lane, that's not going to work, because then one guy can guard three guys. I literally was teaching this to my 10U basketball team. It wasn't even in a fast break. It was actually in the half court situation. I was talking about spacing and if you're too close, one guy can guard two guys. Same thing on a fast break, right? If you're too close, one guy can guard two, or in this case, what we saw multiple times in this game, one guy can guard three guys. That was a problem. One of them was Terrence Shannon led. He should have kicked it ahead to Dillingham. There was another, I think it was a different fast break. Might have been McDaniels. There was a lob opportunity to Ant. Ant took an angle that was too close to, I think, maybe Nas, and Jaden or whoever had it didn't make the pass, probably because Ant and Nas were too close to each other and ended up getting the ball knocked out of bounds off of him. And just multiple, just easy stuff. And this isn't a coaching thing. It's not. Because what are you going to do? Tell these guys to do what they should have learned when they were 7? I mean, seriously, I'm not oversimplifying this. That is what it is. A 3-on-1 fast break is about spacing and the timing of your passes. And if you don't run it right, it's not on the coaching staff. They were taught that 15 years ago, right? Maybe if it's something that continually happens, you can look at, I don't know, making sure that your team is disciplined, stuff like that. Fine. It's just bad execution. These guys know better. That was frustrating because it's just leaving opportunities. And those were in the first half, when this game was at least somewhat still in the balance and the Wolves are trying to get back into it. And that's another example of those are opportunities kicked away. That's reflected in the lack of assists. It's reflected in the lack of fast break points, which I know they technically beat Cleveland in fast break points in the category, but there were so many more opportunities there for Minnesota. I mean, the Cavs turned it over 16 times. They played pretty sloppy as well, and they played pretty loosey-goosey at times, and they played fast, and Minnesota just kicked away some of those opportunities. It was pretty frustrating. I thought Naz Reid did not have a good game after playing really well on Saturday, especially late in that game when they came back against Portland. Well, obviously Cleveland is not Portland, so I'll say that. But Nas also had some mismatch opportunities he didn't take advantage of. It's partly on him. It's partly on, I could say we could put this partly on the coaching staff of not finding a way to get Nas Reid involved. The dude played 35 minutes, second only to Ant, and only got 12 shots up. And he had smaller guys guarding him. There just should have been more going on for Nas. It's partly on him. It's partly on his teammates, and it's partly on the coaching staff to not manufacture more of those opportunities. But there were multiple times where he had smaller dudes guarding him, and they just couldn't get him the ball. Let's talk about Ant. Anthony Edwards had 44 points on 13 of 28 shooting. He started a little bit slow. Remember, he didn't play Saturday due to the hip soreness. And then he got hot. Second quarter, and then also into the third quarter, was frustrated with a lack of foul calls. Got a technical at the end of the second quarter, which is his league-leading 12th technical. He's only 4 away now from a one-game suspension, so he's got to figure that out, which I thought had been improving for a little while, but I guess no dice there. But 13 to 28, 8 of 15 on threes, continues to lead the NBA in three-point makes, and I believe attempts as well. Fine, like that's great. I mean, 15 threes and you make more than half of them and you get to the line 13 times. That's not a bad night. He did turn it over 7 times and he only had 1 assist. Not great. But nobody else was making baskets. Like he had one really bad pass to Rudy. The idea was correct. He had a 2 travels. One, I think the step through was a bad call. There was another one that was clearly a travel. That's 3 off the top of my head. Bad turnover or 3 turnovers. He had one where he just missed a pass near the timeline for a backcourt violation. I'm pretty sure that was charged to him because he should have caught it. So some sloppy mistakes in there, and those really add up. I mean, he had 7 of the Wolves, 16 turnovers. Problem is nobody else came to the party. Like, nobody else in the starting lineup. Rudy had 12 points. Jaden only had 10, and Nas had 10. Both McDaniels and Reid were so good on Saturday, and Nickeil too. Like, McDaniels had 30, and Nas and Nickeil each had 20 plus. Turns out, step up a class and play, or 2 classes and play Cleveland. Those guys combined to score 26 points on 26 shots. They were all over 20 points on Saturday. Nickeil, Nas, Jaden, they combined, I'll say it again, to score 26 points on 26 shots in Cleveland on Monday night. They combined to shoot 3 of 14 on 3-point attempts. Now, most of those looks were good. Nas forced maybe 1 of his 6. Nickeil forced maybe 1 of his 4. But they just missed shots. That was the biggest thing. Yeah, I don't know. I thought overall Ant played well, and there was an element in the second half of hero ball, but like, what are you going to do? Like, if nobody else is going to score, Rob Dillingham was second leading scorer on the team, had 13 points on 14 shots, did not play well, had a couple buckets in garbage time. So like, nobody else scored for Minnesota in this game. It was pretty disappointing. And sure, we can blame some of the lack of ball movement on Anthony Edwards, but we could also blame the lack of scoring on his teammates. I mean, those guys weren't making shots. They weren't generating opportunities for others either. Nobody had more than 4 assists on the Wolves. No Mike Conley matters. When Joe Ingles came into the game in the second quarter, that was when the Wolves had their first kind of burst. And, they actually had a shot, it felt like. By the way, plus minus is not my favorite thing in an individual game, but you take out the garbage time guys, so Minot, Miller, and Newton, who only played garbage time, and Joe Ingles was the only guy on the team with a positive plus minus. He was a +2 in 15 minutes. Jalen Clark played 15 minutes. He was a -22. Nickeil Alexander-Walker played 26 minutes. He was a -33 in a game the Wolves lost by 21 points, which, yeah, he was on the floor at the start of the game. Guess what? He only played 1 minute less than Rudy. So Nickeil played 26 minutes, was a -33. Rudy Gobert played 27 minutes, was a -6. So it was 27 points better in plus minus than Nickeil. I think it means something in this game a little bit. I'll do studs and duds here next, and I'll do that fairly quickly, and then I want to talk ownership, and then we can flush this game, move on, talk about the next 2 difficult games for Minnesota, Milwaukee and OKC later this week. We'll do all that here next. All right. So studs and duds in this one. Anthony Edwards has to be a stud. I know the 7 turnovers is fine, but he kept them in the game. He's a stud. I'm going to give Rudy Gobert 1 because he's not in charge of generating his own offense, and he had 6 offensive rebounds, was active in the paint, I thought he was pretty physical in this game. It would have been great if he had more than 8 rebounds. He ended up only playing 27 minutes because of how the game was going. He had 12 points, 8 rebounds, 6 offensive rebounds, a couple of blocks, was 4 of 6 shooting, so he gets a stud in this game as well. And I don't know who else I would even give one to. I guess I would have to go with Joe Ingles. I don't know. He didn't score at all. Like he was the reason why the offense got moving in the second quarter, and then a little bit, I think, end of the third quarter. I don't know. Do I mean that? I don't think I do. But like nobody else played well. Like the duds are a lot easier in this game. I'm not going to give one to Nas. You know, was great. He wasn't great. He's not a stud, but he's not really a dud. Nikhil's a dud. He was 0 for 4 on threes. Only had 2 assists when he basically started as the point guard, and was a minus 33 in 26 minutes. And then I'm also going to give a dud to Rob Dillingham because I thought he was all over the place. Scored a little bit in garbage time. I think he had maybe 3 air balls again in this game. He had 2 air balls and he hit the side of the backboard on another shot on Saturday. And hey, I know all missed shots are essentially equal. It's not really true because if you hit the rim, at least you got a better shot at an offensive rebound and a shot that the ball bounces in. But man, he's missed some shots by a lot. He also missed a couple of layups that he typically makes. So not a good game for Rob. So I'm going to go only 2 studs. I'm rescinding my Joe Ingles because like he's got to do something in a category besides just plus minus to get a stud. So I'm going to go Ant and Rudy as studs, Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Rob Dillingham as duds in this game. That's it. I don't want to talk about this game anymore. Just another awful start for Minnesota. They've just got to come out and they just got to make shots. When they get open opportunities at the start of games, it's so imperative that they make shots. And a lot of times they've been playing so much better on the road in general this season than at home. So it's weird that this happened. And now they go back home. They get Milwaukee on Wednesday night. Obviously, the Bucks got off to a terrible start this season, but they've been really good lately. I think they're up to like 5th in the East. And then OKC, the best team in the league, on Thursday night, second night of a back-to-back. Feels unlikely that Mike Conley is going to play. He had his finger wrapped on the bench in this one, but who knows? Maybe Ant plays in one of the two. I don't know. Maybe he plays in both. But given that he was a game-time decision on Monday, I don't know. We'll see, but it's why the Portland game Saturday was imperative that they won that because it's going to be hard. You know, the Milwaukee game, they should win at home on Wednesday. Like I could make the argument that like they're a better team than the Bucks. They should win if I know no Dante, no Julius Randle, but still that's a winnable game. Thursday is going to be next to impossible to beat OKC on the second night of a back-to-back headed into the All-Star break. Maybe you get a last day of school. Summer starts tomorrow, sort of a feel from OKC with the All-Star break coming, but probably not. They don't tend to have those issues. Like those dudes are always locked in. I mean, again, on Monday night, I mean, it was the Pelicans, but like they destroyed the Pelicans by 36. So I don't know. All right, let's talk about the ownership thing real quickly. So this came out end of day Monday, end of the business day, that the arbitration panel that had heard the case, obviously not a court of law case, but the I guess the ownership dispute between Glenn Taylor and Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez. If you're listening to this at this point in the show, like you probably know what happened there. There was a dispute, a 3-person panel. Each party appointed somebody for the panel, and then they had a third mutually agreed upon person, according to Glenn Taylor's statement. After the ruling, it was a 2-1 split decision in favor of Lowry and Rodriguez. The next step is just going before the NBA owners, the Board of Governors. They need to get 23 of the 30 to approve the transfer of ownership, the majority stake. It's usually a formality. We had talked a while back about that being potentially a hurdle because of Glenn Taylor's long relationship and membership as an owner since like the mid-90s, 94. So we're talking 30 plus years of ownership. So he's got equity with those owners. I mean, he was the president of the Board of Governors for a while, or chairman of the board, I guess is what it's called. So certainly there's potential for there to be some owners that hold out in favor of Glenn Taylor, but it seems unlikely that it would be as many as 7, or I guess it would need to be 8, especially with the arbitration ruling. And if there was any question about the viability of Lowry and Rodriguez as owners, the financial piece of things, remember they added former Mayor Bloomberg, who's a billionaire, and the former Google CEO to help them with cash flow, essentially, and to give them some extra clout. And we knew that couldn't matter in terms of the arbitration panel, because that was only supposed to be based on the alleged breach of contract that each party was alleging of the other from back last March, I think it was. This is taking almost a year. So they were only ruling on that. Like the arbitration panel wasn't deciding like, hey, they do or don't have the money. But this should help with any owners that would be concerned that, hey, there's not going to be enough cash flow for the Wolves or whatever. This should, assuage any of those concerns, knowing that they have Bloomberg and they have, what's the Google CEO's name? I don't recall what it was. Eric Schmidt, former Google CEO. So like they've got the cash now. That's not going to be an issue. So it should happen long term. This has to be a good thing for the Timberwolves. I've said this all along. Like, seems more likely Tim Conley is going to stick around. The discussion about I'm not having that now about if Tim Connolly is good or not. The answer is he is good. And we can talk more about that another day. If I don't know, there seems to be people that think he hasn't done a good job, which is mind boggling. Tim Connolly sticking around is like, compare Tim Connolly to every other president of basketball operations the Wolves have ever had. And you feel good about him running the Timberwolves. So remember, he kicked his opt-out down the road a year, so he can opt out this summer. I speculated at the time, as did others, that this, kicking the can for him was at least in part because of the ownership dispute. And now he knows who's his boss moving forward. I remember Laurie and Rodriguez were the ones who pushed Glenn Taylor to be so aggressive in bringing in Tim Connolly and hiring him away from the Denver Nuggets a few years ago. So one would expect that he would stick around beyond this year. Not that the Wolves don't have a super challenging cap situation that, yes, Tim Connolly was a big part of creating, but I think it's a lot better to have a team that's probably going to win 45 to 50 plus games again, probably 45 plus games for a second straight year, than the alternative, which is most of Timberwolves history, which is not successful. So all that to say, this is good news for Timberwolves fans. A little bit sad that the Glenn Taylor, I don't know, call me crazy, call me sappy, nostalgic, whatever. I know Glenn Taylor is, for all intents and purposes, not a good owner. I get it. It's a little sad that this is how he's going to go out as the majority owner, is kicking and screaming, make it like it really looks like. And he even came out and said he wanted to be a part of things still because the team is so good. Last year when he made those comments publicly, like, he's struggling with how he's handled this. Add in the fact he's put the team up for sale other times in the past and changed his mind. Like, it's just not a good way for this to end for Glenn Taylor. And who knows what this means moving forward? Like, do we eventually get Kevin Garnett in the ownership group? Do we get Kevin Garnett his jersey retirement finally? Like, all these things are going to be coming at some point. But it's, I don't know. It's good to hopefully have this in the rearview mirror here, assuming that things get passed at the Board of Governor level here in short order. All right. That's all we got for you today here on the show. I'll be back Wednesday. We're going to talk a little bit about the Timberwolves offense. Monday's game notwithstanding, some of the stuff we talked about on Monday's show, kind of middle of the show, about the Wolves offense, their increase in free throw rate, their increase in offensive rebound rate, and how they've shifted their offense over the past 5-6 weeks or so. We'll break that down in a bit more detail on Wednesday. We'll also preview the Wolves-Bucks matchup. We have not seen Milwaukee yet this year, so we'll talk about the Bucks season to date and how the two teams match up before Wednesday night's game. So we'll do all that on Wednesday's show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Amazon, Roku, and Amazon Fire TV. You can also watch on, that's what I just said, the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can subscribe to the daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Make sure to sign up at LockedOnDaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.